knew the film that would make me completely forget about the Barbenheimer experience would be some little Australian horror film, this amazing little film that I could summarize in one very dumb sentence. Talk to the hand, because it is listening. Talk to Me is a wild ride. It is one of the best horror films I have seen in ages. It's just one of the best films I've seen in ages. And not only that, it is Australian. And as a fellow Australian, and I do feel bad saying this, I really don't think we get films that are this special that often that come out of Australia. Films that just kind of wow me on every single level. I found this film to be incredibly exciting and fun and amazing and imaginative and creative, but also, and obviously you want this in a horror film, completely terrifying. Like, really upsetting, but just in a really fresh and unique way. The story of Talk to Me is there is an object, in this case a hand, and this object is possessed, and people touch it, and then spirits and ghosts go boo. We've seen this before. We've seen this maybe 600,000 times. This is not a unique kind of premise in kind of like its basic idea. Yet nothing about this felt derivative. Nothing about this felt like I'd seen it before. It was so amazing in just how it presented an idea that, like, on paper isn't wholly original, yet it made it feel like this was one of the most unique horror film ideas I have seen in forever. This film was directed by Danny and Michael Philippou. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it is their first film. The first film they've ever directed. It is an astonishing fact. It is such a spectacularly crafted film. Like, every single aspect of the filmmaking side of it is so accomplished. It is a film you would expect from someone who's directed like 3 or 4 films. It is one of those first films where you see it, and it reminds me of Jordan Peele's Get Out, where you see it and you go, how is this the first feature film you've made? It's so perfect in so many different ways, and it does exactly what it sets out to do. It's amazing. I'm so impressed by it. Atmosphere, tone, score, the acting. Oh my God, the acting they got out of all these people. So good. Authentic Aussie acting, like, oh my God. But it doesn't feel like it's trying to be too Australian. Like, it doesn't have characters going around being like, bloody oath, mate. Oh, bloody cobber. And it doesn't have this kind of very over-the-top stereotypical version of Australia that I feel like is kind of presented in films. And it's just crafted this really great vibe in the film, which I found to be extremely exciting and an accomplishment in and of itself from the directors to get such great grounded performances from all these kids, all these teens, and a couple of the parents, like in a movie that is about a supernatural hand that when you touch it, you get possessed. The hand itself feels like a horror icon being born. It feels like we're getting another one of these iconic horror franchises started, but it doesn't feel like they're trying to do that. It doesn't feel like they're trying to create this thing and frame it and position it in a way where they're like, oh, we better get 15 sequels because we're really trying with this concept and idea and this image of the hand, the way it just sits there in just like a little handshake kind of thing. It's so weird and creepy and upsetting. It's got all these like words written on it. It never focuses on all the scribblings over it. It's just very clean. A white hand with a bunch of scribble on it. And it's doing a thing which is generally considered a pretty friendly thing. A handshake. Just a friendly old handshake. But it's so sinister in the way, and it's so matter of fact. It's just there. It doesn't come to life and do crazy weird stuff. It is just this inanimate object, but the way that the film kind of presents it, I found to be incredibly exciting and interesting and terrifying. Every single time it was on screen, just chills. I think a film like this is how you create these really big, iconic, kind of over the generations, decades horror villains. Your Freddy Kruegers, your Jasons, your Saw with little Billy on the bicycle. You have this just image, this idea, and it just works for this one film. But I would not be surprised. My God, I hope this film does well. I hope people go see it because it's so good. But it feels like something where I can see in 10 years, we'll get 15 spin-offs and they'll all be terrible. And maybe there'll be like the 4th one where everyone goes, well, actually the 4th one's actually pretty good. It's kind of a return to form. And one of the original writers, he was actually on board. So you can kind of see like hints of what made the first film good. This film just had that vibe to me, which I absolutely loved, but nothing about it felt like they were trying to do that. They were just trying to tell this one simple, beautifully, elegantly simple story. The acting in this film I found to be incredible. Like, it's super restraint and kind of just like realistic, and it just feels authentic. I've said those words too many times. Possession, as I said at the start, is something we get all the time, and I'm happy this film didn't kind of fall into that kind of Exorcist kind of trope. Not in the original Exorcist, but in so many other Exorcist films and films with exorcism and devil possession, where they do a deep voice and they're like, blah, 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 and they just kind of fall into that lane, and it doesn't really become frightening. In this, the way they do it is so good. It's kind of almost restrained in a way, but the standout is the lead actress. She's incredible in her normal just character, but when she's being possessed, just so upsettingly scary. Sophie Wilde, I want to say. I checked my phone. It's Sophie Wilde. She's spectacular, amazing. Haven't seen her in anything before except for Eden, this Australian show that's on Stan, which is pretty much like what if Australia did Twin Peaks, but worse. She's great in that. I don't really remember her being in that, but I have to imagine, since I thought everyone was great in that she was also great. But in this, exceptional, really great. She has kind of the most emotional stuff going on, and she has the biggest arc, and I found her to be very good. Like, you know when you're like watching a movie and just suddenly you're seeing someone's performance and you're like, I am going to be seeing this person on screen for the next 15 years. They are going to be so sought after, and I had that vibe with her. Just the expressions and the emotions she kind of carried us through in these crazy scenes or in these really kind of grounded, realistic moments. She just nailed all of them. Another thing I found amazing about the acting, the vibe. The vibe felt so real. Maybe I just don't watch any good Australian stuff, but this just had something different. It had something that felt so wholly Australian and unique. The way everyone vibed at the parties and these little party scenes, I found to be really well crafted. Everyone had a really good vibe around each other. And then as the film takes its turns and becomes really intense and serious, I found the transition from just these fun party guys into like the more serious stuff. They all nailed that as well. Honestly, it's hard to find an aspect of this film that I don't think was done expertly and incredibly. Like score, fantastic. Cinematography, inventive, creative, interesting, fun, dynamic. Oh my god, the way the camera would move with characters as they were getting possessed and moving about was just so cool and interesting and fun, but also like super scary. All the things, acting, I probably said the score, but the score was great. But one thing that cannot be overstated, I cannot overhype this, the makeup and special effects in this movie are incredible. Oh my god, every single time I saw any kind of ghoulish, monstrous thing, or someone's just hit their head in the blood and the gore and the awful, intense, disgusting, gross imagery. Oh my god, it just looks so good and just really grossly real. It never kind of went into the areas of kind of feeling like, oh, well, it's a film. Like, there's never a moment where someone like rips a hand off and blood's exploding everywhere, and it just like suddenly goes, oh, that's fun and cool, but it's gone over the top and now I don't buy it. All of the violence, whilst quite bare, which I actually really enjoyed, definitely not a gore fest. If you're looking for jump scares, gore fest, this won't be for you. But also, if you're looking for that, what the film gives you, you'll be like, oh, I don't want that. I want this film. The way it would just do little shocking moments of brutality and violence, they really hit home and they were felt real. Like the makeup feels really gross and awful. And there's one scene towards the end that is so depraved, and the way they barely show it was really clever. I feel like a less kind of confident director or dual directing kind of team might be like, okay, this moment, we've got to show more. We've got to really make people go, whoa. Whereas they barely show it, but even just those little moments and hints, the suggestions, so upsetting. I was disgusted. I was like, oh no. Oh no! Another huge highlight I found in this film is one of the mum characters, or the main mum character, is played by Eowyn from Lord of the Rings. And she's amazing. Just the way she acts, her vibe as a mum, especially in the first half of the film before she really gets crazy. It was just such a great vibe. And 3 guesses which words I would use to describe her performance. Authentic, realistic, great Aussie vibe. I cannot stress how much I think the film nails all those aspects. She is so good in this movie. It's just great to see her and stuff. Loved that. Very briefly, the end, without spoiling anything. The last 3 minutes of this film are so spectacular. It is just such, the way it ends, just throughout those last 3 minutes, I felt like I was a second ahead of what was happening, but in the best way, where I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is going to happen. Then it would happen, I'm like, thank God, that's the perfect choice. And it just kept nailing those moments. And I just left the cinema so overwhelmed with happiness in a horrific, awful way. It's such a great end. It does everything I love in a horror movie end of a film. I found it immensely satisfying, just so good. It's the best film I have seen in ages, since last week when I watched Oppenheimer, which was easily the best film I'd seen in ages, since the week before that when I saw Mission Impossible 7. I love this film so much. It's so good. I cannot wait to see the inferior sequel and then the inferior sequel to that. And then maybe the 4th one will be a cheeky return to form. Alright, so just quickly, a little spoiler kind of review talk bit about the very end, because I had something I kind of want to discuss, and I'm kind of curious what people think about it. If you've seen the film, we'd really like to know what you found about this ending. So at the end of the movie, we've got our main character, and she's wheeling other character, and she's got him up against the highway, and he's in the wheelchair, and then we're following people in the car, to give us a little moment of who's going to fall and hit the car. Someone hits the car, and then we get a big wide shot bird's eye view and we've got main character Sophie Wilde. She's there, and she's like the kangaroo. It's a metaphor, symbolism, bookend, film, or whatever. You've seen a film. And we get a shot of her. And so it's okay, she jumped. Or did she? Did she get pushed? And so it's kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's an odd choice to make it ambiguous at that moment. Because it's either she decided at the last minute, hey, I'm going to kill myself, and I'm not going to kill this boy, my family, my found family, and I'm going to kill myself because otherwise I can't stop this, all the demons, all the spirits or ghosts sort of around me. I've got to end this. Or did the sister run down and push her and save her brother, sorry. And so it doesn't explain either way. And then as she walks around as the spirit, before she sees the hand on the other end, which is just, oh my God, just realizing that was going to happen as she's walking through the darkness. Just, I loved it so much. It was so clever. And just her shock. And I'm like, oh God. Straight away. I loved it so much. But I do not really understand why you would make that ambiguous. But I feel like it's not ambiguous for me. And I feel like the sister had to have killed her, because I don't think the film has done enough kind of groundwork in that 3rd act to make the character decide that she's going to follow her mum's footsteps in committing suicide. And I understand that she's doing a different thing. She's got spirits and ghosts haunting her, but the whole film has been kind of building up to her finding out about her mum not accidentally dying from pills but killing herself intentionally. So it doesn't really feel like a thing the character would do. So if they're intending for half the audience to think one way, half to think the other, to make it ambiguous, I don't really know why you would make one of them that if you haven't made enough kind of character decisions. Because if someone thinks that's what's happened, I feel like that's underdeveloped, and the character hasn't done enough in those final couple of 20 minutes of the film to be I will accept this despite the fact that I'm going to be following my mom's footsteps, in a really sad, tragic way. So I just feel like that doesn't really work for me. And I kind of feel like maybe I want a something as she's walking as a spirit, something to imply that maybe her friend killed her. But the friend seems just so happy her brother's back, and the brother's totally healed suddenly. So it's how long has passed? It feels like it's very sudden. So I just feel like something there, because I don't mind it being ambiguous, but I just feel like the two decisions, I'd kind of like to have maybe a little bit more hints on either end, to kind of, I don't know, to have more kind of reasons to be falling into one side to the other. Because the only reason I think the friend definitely killed her is just because I think the other one doesn't work. But yeah, I'm super curious what people think. I really don't think that's a big issue. It's just this tiny little thought I had as the film ended, as I was leaving the cinema. Because after that moment, I'm happy to have one creative decision in an entire film not work for me when the last 3 minutes straight after that is so well done. Just like on a visual level, her walking through the hospital, the light slowly going out, her in the darkness, the match being lit, us kind of realizing before she realizing what she's walking towards. She thinks she's walking towards like the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not like a light at the end of the tunnel. It's someone lighting the candle because they've said, talk to me, and do the hand, and then he says, I'll let you in, and I'm just like, ah! And it's so good. It's so, so good. So I don't mind there being a creative decision towards the end that I don't think works for the rest of it to work so well. And everything before that to just be so, so good. I actually found there to be a little kind of cheeky subtext throughout this film that I thought was kind of interesting and something I feel like we don't see that often with kind of supernatural films. Because a lot of horror films now, they don't just do the slasher scream kind of situation. They'll have like a subtext of like, you know, like Babadook. It's a movie about a spooky Babadook. But actually, it's about parenting and motherhood. And so this film is mostly centered around grief and depression. And all of that stuff worked really well, really sad and intense. Kind of hit some really heavy beats and moments throughout the film. And another thing in terms of subtext that I found about this film, and this could be me misinterpreting or kind of reading the scenes, but there's a lot of party scenes that involve like the possession, and a lot of it felt like it was really heavily kind of talking about kind of peer pressure in relation to drugs and alcohol. And there are a couple of characters and a couple of lines, but just there's one scene, there's one montage, to like a possession montage, which I think is the best thing I've ever seen in a horror film in a long time. And it felt like a party scene, like a drug drinking kind of kids teenage party scene, but it was a supernatural horror version of that. And I found those parallels really interesting. And then with some stuff towards the back half of the story with the plot to do with one of the characters, I found it really interesting, but it never felt like it was kind of batting you over the head with those ideas. Like if you just wanted to not think about any of those things and just watch a spooky, scary movie that was atmospheric and terrifying and had a great iconic horror image icon situation in the hand, you've got that. But if you want to kind of like peel the curtain back and see a little deeper, I found this film really interesting with a lot of the themes it's discussing and to be quite intense at times. Visually interesting and kind of thought-provoking and kind of deep. Also, just on things that are super incredible, and for some reason I felt like it was a spoiler to say it, but it's probably not. My favorite part of this film was when one of the characters called the ghost, like, they're like, this spirit's a bit of a C-bomb. And I can't really think of anything that feels more Australian than someone at a party calling a spirit the C-bomb. It's just movie magic in the making. I loved it so much.